I'm Grindle. Welcome to this video. I caught up with the first episode of The Orville, and I figured that considering how much science fiction this channel does, and considering that The Orville is a live-action sci-fi comedy with a large budget and starring a name as big as Seth MacFarlane's, I should probably talk about it. And so, The Orville. Firstly, I'd like to nip in the butt a complaint I've seen people making ever since the trailer of the series was released. Namely, that it's just a rip-off of Galaxy Quest. This complaint I don't feel to be fair at all. They are, of course, both parodies of Star Trek, true, but Star Trek had such a large impact on society that I don't see why there should be any ruling that there can only be one parody of the shows, or shows in fact. I mean, after all, that's like saying you can only parody Star Wars once, and if that's the case, well then we've definitely exceeded that limit. It doesn't have, I can now promise you, any real similarities with Galaxy Quest, as after all the entire crux of Galaxy Quest was that it's a bunch of actors that are fish out of water thrown into a sci-fi adventure, whereas The Orville is decidedly not. The comedic nature of The Orville, or probably more accurately, the presumed comedic nature of The Orville, is I think one of the things that is immediately dividing people on the series before they've even seen it. Because people are assuming that to enjoy the show, you have to be either a fan of Seth MacFarlane, a fan of Star Trek, or a fan of both. Which I don't feel is entirely the case. If you don't like Family Guy, you may still enjoy this series because, rather ironically, it's actually more grounded than Family Guy, which is pretty funny for a sci-fi. And if you don't know Star Trek too well, you definitely don't need any knowledge of it. This series, while definitely being a parody of Star Trek, is not so much dependent on it as, say, Family Guy's Blue Harvest is on Star Wars, as it really requires no actual knowledge of the show to enjoy it. You'll definitely enjoy some of the elements of The Orville more if you do have a familiarity with Star Trek, but as I said, it's not required. The show seems to be more just making fun of tropes and referencing art style, and the soundtrack has a very strong Next Generation vibe going to it, but you definitely don't need to know the story to enjoy the show, because aside from them both having exploratory vessels out in space, it is all original characters and all original story. And so don't go into it expecting to have a New Hope knowledge of Star Wars like you have to enjoy Blue Harvest, because it doesn't really seem to be just a slice-of-life situational comedy set in space that happens to be inspired by Star Trek rather than being a direct parody of it. I would say that as far as Seth MacFarlane's comedy goes, it's a lot closer to Ted than it is to Family Guy, with all of the comedy coming from the banter between characters rather than flashbacks to ridiculous situations. The comedy in this first episode was, I feel, to be a little bit lukewarm. I didn't really laugh out loud at any point. I did chuckle a couple of times though. Although I do feel this is for two main reasons. Firstly, unfortunately, this is very much the case in which all of the best jokes were used in the trailer, so while I did laugh out loud at them when I watched the trailer, when I got to the actual show itself, I had already heard them, I had already laughed at them, and jokes are never really as funny the second time. And the second reason being that this first episode has the mammoth task of setting up the entire universe of the show, and introducing you to all of the main characters. It's just difficult to fit that many jokes in when you're setting up an entire universe, and unfortunately, when it comes to situational comedy, a lot of the humour and joy comes from hearing the back and forth between the characters, which you don't enjoy quite so much until you know the characters themselves. So I think the comedy is going to probably continue to pick up as the series goes on, and we're going to enjoy their wit and banter a lot more when we actually start to care about the characters. The upside of all this, though, is that while actually watching the episode, I really didn't notice or care that I wasn't laughing that much. I did in reflection when I went to make this video, but when I was actually watching it, I wasn't enjoying the show too much to really be considering its comedic merit. You see, the universe and story that the first episode is working to establish are actually genuinely interesting, and the characters, while I think the bickering between the main character and his ex-wife will probably get old real fast, are actually pretty likeable. And so, when the episode ended, I didn't find myself thinking, holy heck, I've never laughed so hard in my life, but I did find myself really wanting to see what would happen next. And that's really, I think, what I wanted more, because we've already got Family Guy, we didn't need Family Guy in space. However, we don't have enough high-budget sci-fi comedies that are actually really good, campy, live-action sci-fi. So if that's what this series continues to be, then I think The Orville could actually become a really fantastic show. And with all of that said and done, thanks for watching, and until next time, I have been and still am Grindle.